But the humans didn't stop there. They began training the Yari to use technology in ways they had never thought of before. The Zorath's own technology, their weapons, their AI drones, could be turned against them. Bonner and his team introduced the Yari to AI hacking, a skill humanity had learned from their own encounters with hostile AIs. If they could control the Zorath's technology, they could turn the tide of the war. The Yari, with their advanced understanding of science and technology, quickly adapted to the idea. Together, humans and Yari began designing countermeasures, cloaking devices, EMP pulses, and traps that would make the Zorath's machines malfunction. In the days that followed, there was a sense of urgency in the air. The Yari were no longer just hiding. They were preparing to fight. They might not have been warriors by nature, but with the help of the humans, they had found a new purpose: survival. As the days passed, the sense of urgency grew. The Zorath's forces were gathering, preparing for their final invasion of the Yari homeworld. The once peaceful planet was now a war zone, and the Yari knew they had little time left. But with the humans by their side, they had hope, something they hadn't felt in a long time. The training began immediately. The Yari were smart, but they were not soldiers. They were used to thinking, not fighting. Under Bonner's guidance, they began to learn new skills. The humans taught them the basics of guerrilla warfare: how to move swiftly and silently through the environment, how to strike quickly and retreat before the enemy could respond. These tactics weren't easy for the Yari, but their brilliant minds picked them up quickly. They had an advantage: their intelligence. As the Yari trained in combat, they also started working on their own countermeasures. Using the technology the humans brought with them, they began to adapt cloaking devices, learning to blend in with the environment and avoid detection. They studied human defense systems, working side by side with the humans to enhance their own weapons and shields. Every day they grew stronger, more capable of defending themselves. Tension built not just on the battlefield but between the people. Bonner spent long hours training the Yari, but he also found himself connecting with Dr. Lyra, a brilliant Yari scientist. They shared moments of quiet reflection, away from the noise of the training camps. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Dr. Lyra's eyes darkened. "I lost my family to the Zorath," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "My children, my husband, all gone. They were wiped out before I could even fight back." Bonner felt a heavy weight in his chest. His own losses were not so different. He had watched too many of his friends die in battle. He turned to Dr. Lyra, his face grim. "I fear, what if we fail? What if all of this is for nothing?" Lyra's eyes softened. "Then we fight anyway. For them. For the future." Her words hung in the air, and Bonner knew she was right. Failure was a real possibility, but they couldn't stop now. The Yari were depending on them, and the humans had already made a choice. They would fight. In the days that followed, the action picked up. Bonner's team led hit-and-run missions against the Zorath's supply lines, moving like shadows through the night. These small, daring attacks were risky, but they worked. The humans, with their superior tactics and the Yari's technology, were able to sabotage Zorath drones, destroy communication networks, and disrupt supply routes. Each success, no matter how small, gave the Yari hope. The once hopeless Yari now began to believe they could win. They had learned to fight, to stand strong, and for the first time they saw that they could defeat the Zorath. The rising tension in the air wasn't just fear, it was the spark of defiance. The bond between the humans and Yari deepened. Together they weren't just defending a world, they were creating a future. And with every small victory, the Zorath Empire grew closer to its downfall. The final battle had arrived. The humans and the Yari knew that this would be the moment that determined the fate of their worlds. The Zorath were coming, their massive fleet looming just outside the Yari system, prepared to wipe out everything in their path. For weeks, Bonner and his team had been preparing for this day, knowing it would be their last chance to stop the Zorath. The Yari, once seen as weak and helpless, had transformed into a formidable ally. With their knowledge of technology and the humans' battle tactics, they had built a plan, one that could give them a fighting chance. Bonner stood with Dr. Lyra and the rest of his crew in the command center, looking out at the horizon. The Yari's once beautiful cities were now fortified, their defenses strengthened by human technology. The city walls were reinforced and traps were set in place, ready for the incoming Zorath invasion. The battle was not just about surviving, it was about proving that they could win, that they could defend what was theirs. "We need to hit them first," Bonner said, his voice steady but full of determination. "We can't wait for them to strike. We'll hit them hard before they even get close." The humans and Yari had been working together, creating a powerful orbital bombardment system. Using the advanced cloaking technology, they planned a surprise strike against the Zorath fleet. The first wave of attacks would come from space, massive orbital cannons hidden from view until it was too late. Bonner's team would lead the charge, launching the first wave of missiles to destroy key parts of the Zorath's fleet before they could land. As the first missiles blasted through the atmosphere, Bonner's heart raced. The ground shook as explosions filled the sky, and for a moment it seemed like they might actually have a chance. The Zorath fleet retaliated, sending down their AI-controlled robots to engage. These robots were powerful, cold, calculating machines built for one purpose: destruction. They swarmed down to the surface, their eyes glowing with deadly intent, while the humans and Yari, armed with their newly developed cloaking devices, took cover. The battlefield quickly descended into chaos. Energy beams from Zorath robots lit up the sky, tearing through the air as the humans and Yari tried to stay hidden. Using their guerrilla tactics, they moved swiftly and quietly, striking at the Zorath forces before retreating into the shadows. It was a fight of speed and strategy, of shadows against steel. Bonner's team was on the front lines, coordinating the defense. They had no time to hesitate. Every second counted. As Bonner gave orders over the comms, he watched as his soldiers used cloaking devices to outmaneuver the Zorath's machines. With each successful attack, the morale of the humans and Yari grew stronger, but so did the danger. The Zorath had their own tricks. They used advanced scanning technology that could detect even cloaked soldiers. But the humans and Yari fought back with everything they had, adapting quickly to every new challenge. Then the worst moment came. As Bonner was leading a small strike against a Zorath stronghold, a massive explosion rocked the area. The shockwave sent Bonner flying, and when the dust settled, he looked around to see the body of his best friend, Sergeant Mallory, lying motionless on the ground. Mallory had been with Bonner through countless battles. They had fought side by side, and Bonner had always trusted him with his life. The pain of seeing him dead was overwhelming, but it also lit a fire in Bonner's chest. This fight was no longer just about survival. It was about avenging his friend and saving a race that had been abandoned by the galaxy. For the first time, Bonner realized that the Yari were not just strangers, they were now his responsibility. With a roar of anger and grief, Bonner pushed forward, rallying his team. The fight had become personal. Every Zorath drone, every robot, every machine that stood in their way would now feel the weight of Bonner's loss. He knew the stakes were higher than ever before. The Yari needed them, not just for survival, but to prove that they weren't just victims of the galaxy's indifference. The battle intensified, with the Zorath's machines closing in. The Yari, once fearful, now fought with courage they hadn't known they had. They hacked into the Zorath systems, turning their own technology against them. The humans' guerrilla tactics and the Yari's ingenuity began to overwhelm the Zorath forces. Bonner's team, despite taking heavy losses, pressed forward, refusing to back down. The climactic battle reached its peak when Bonner led the final assault against the Zorath flagship. It was a deadly last push, but the combined strength of the humans and Yari overwhelmed the enemy. Zorath forces, once unstoppable, began to crumble. Bonner and his team fought through the chaos, their every step driven by the memories of those they had lost. By the end of the day, the Zorath were defeated. The humans and Yari had won, against all odds. But for Bonner, the victory was bittersweet. He looked out over the battlefield, where the cost had been high, but the hope for the future was stronger than ever. The Yari had survived, and so had the humans. Together, they had proven that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire strong enough to change the course of history. The battle was won, but the true victory lay in the alliances forged, in the lives saved, and in the hope that no one would ever be abandoned again. The battle against the Zorath had been fierce and relentless. For years, humanity's small fleet of ships had been racing across the galaxy, trying to push back the AI-controlled Zorath Empire. The Zorath, with their immense firepower and emotionless determination, had been steamrolling through worlds, crushing any species that was weak or unprepared. No one had ever stood a chance against them until humans. But now a new plea for help echoed across the galaxy, faint and desperate. The signal came from an alien race the humans had never heard of before, the Yari. The message was short, but it carried a weight of hopelessness, a cry for help that felt almost as if they were already giving up. The humans, having been in constant conflict with the Zorath, weren't in the best shape themselves. Their resources were drained, their morale low. Despite all that, Captain Bonner couldn't ignore the Yalari's cry for help. He looked at the worn-out faces of his crew, their eyes heavy with fatigue, knowing they weren't in a position to fight another war. Yet something about the Yalari's message pulled at Bonner's heart. The Yalari were not asking for just supplies or shelter, they were begging for survival. This was different. "We can't let them die out," Bonner said, slamming his fist on the table. The crew exchanged doubtful glances. They had barely survived their last battle, and now they were being asked to save an entire species. After a moment of hesitation, Bonner gave the order. "Prepare the fleet. We're heading to their world." The journey to the Yalari home planet took several days. As their ships cloaked in invisibility, avoiding Zorath patrols, Bonner felt the weight of the decision bearing down on him. Could they really make a difference? The Yalari were a peaceful, scientific race, known for their intelligence but lacking any military power. Their cities were built on knowledge, art, and diplomacy, not war. They had no weapons strong enough to defend themselves, no armies to push back against the Zorath's iron grip. When the human ships arrived at the Yalari homeworld, the scene was one of devastation. The once beautiful cities now lay in ruins, smoldering from recent attacks. The Yalari were a shell of their former selves, fewer in number, broken in spirit, and afraid. Their once pristine planet was now little more than a battlefield. The first meeting between the humans and the Yalari was tense. The Yalari were cautious, skeptical, and confused. They didn't trust the humans. They had been abandoned by the galaxy before, and why should they believe that these strangers would help them now? The humans were still a young species, struggling to survive themselves. Why would they risk their lives for a race that was practically defeated? Dr. Lyra, a lead scientist of the Yalari, stepped forward. She was wary but curious about the humans. "Why would you risk your people for us? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." Bonner, understanding her doubt, met her gaze. "Because we've seen what happens when no one helps. We've seen worlds fall to the Zorath. We know what it's like to be on the edge of extinction. But we also know that with a little hope, a little fight, things can change." The Yalari were silent for a moment. It was a long shot. But in their hearts, they knew they couldn't fight this battle alone. Finally, Dr. Lyra nodded, reluctant yet willing to trust these human warriors. "We have no military. We have no weapons to fight them. What can you do?" That was the moment Bonner and his team knew they had to act fast. The Zorath were coming, and they would stop at nothing to wipe out the Yalari. But the humans had something the Zorath didn't: resourcefulness. They had lived through their own struggles, using their wit and their courage to survive. The Yalari's biggest weakness was their lack of military power, but humans had fought battles without superior weapons or numbers before. Bonner and his team began teaching the Yalari the basics of defense. They started with guerrilla tactics, how to strike quickly and retreat before the enemy could retaliate. They taught them how to use the terrain to their advantage, how to hide in plain sight, and how to cause confusion in their enemies' ranks. The Yalari were quick learners, their sharp minds able to grasp the concepts even if their bodies were not built for war.